Hello, Yellowjackets fans. Pete here, and this is the Lassercast. If you are on the Anchor Pete channel, you might have been looking and you saw, hey, Yellowjackets is back. Where's Pete and his wife, Sherry T? Well, Sherry doesn't want to record any more YouTube reviews. Her YouTube days are done, but I have another significant other, my good friend, Dr. Zeus G.O.D., Danny Torkel, from our channel, the Lassercast. Danny, welcome.
I'm very excited. I came late to this show. I don't have Showtime. I acquired Showtime recently, and I was able to. I haven't done an old-fashioned binge in a long time. I watched all 10 episodes of season 1 this prior weekend, and then Monday night, I watched the first episode of season 2. Yes. So I have watched 11 episodes of this show in the last couple of days. It's very fresh in my mind, and I'm so glad that I finally caught up on this show because I really freaking like it. It reminds me of a show I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about as we move forward.
Right.
But yeah, I'm just glad I finally caught up to this and right in time for season 2 because I thought the first episode of season 2 was great, and we're going to be talking about that along with the second episode of season 2 this coming weekend.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Yellowjackets drops on Showtime on the app on Fridays. Danny and I are going to record a video on Saturdays and get it up on the Lassercast channel as quickly as possible for you guys to watch. So if you're watching this on the Anchor Pete channel right now, make sure that you go over and subscribe to the Lassercast. And if you are on the Lassercast already, you guys are awesome. We love talking to you. On the Lassercast, we cover horror movies and TV shows, and we want you guys to be part of the discussion. So
and I know it's not a big deal in the world of YouTube where so many channels have millions and millions of subscribers, but we're like a few away from 500, which, in the scope of things, we do this mostly for fun. If we ever see a penny from this, it'll be a miracle. But 500 is a nice round number that I think we'd like to get to. Subscribe to the channel. If you're a horror fan, we do so much horror content. We're currently, on the road to Evil Dead Rise. We have reviews of Evil Dead 2013 and Sam Raimi's Drag Me to Hell up on the channel now. Give the video a like, subscribe.
Hell yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yes, exactly. So Sherry and I went over each and every episode last season when they would come out. That's what me and Danny are going to do. Today, we're just going to recap season 1. And so I figured we could talk about the overarching mysteries that were going on throughout the whole season for the first 10 episodes. And I also want to talk about the characters and then also just some great moments, like some of our favorite moments from season 1. So my first question for you, Danny, is who is your favorite character from the Who's your favorite character from Yellowjackets? And you can also clarify if it's like the younger version, the adult version, if it's both. Go ahead, tell me.
So I think I definitely like from the teenage 1996 cast, I think Nat is probably my favorite character. Sophie Thatcher, who is an actress who I immediately recognized. I've seen her in a few things. I think I actually sat in a Q&A panel for a movie she did with Pedro Pascal called Prospect, which was featured at New York Comic Con a few years back. And I covered that in a press panel, and I wrote up a review of that for geeksofdoom.com. A really cool little sci-fi movie if anybody gets a chance to check that out. So I think Sophie Thatcher and her performance as Nat in the 1996 setting, but 2021, it's probably cliche, but definitely Shauna. I've been a Melanie Linsky stan for a long time. I loved her, and this is the least horror movie thing you could ever imagine. I've loved her since Ever After, the Cinderella movie with Drew Barrymore. She played like one of the stepsisters, but she was the good stepsister. And I always thought she was adorable. I loved her. I always loved her acting. She was also in this amazing Peter Jackson movie called Shallow Grave with Kate Winslet. A very
Heavenly
early.
Creatures.
That is correct. I said the wrong movie title. Yes, she was in Heavenly. Wait, yes, Heavenly Creatures. What the hell was Shallow Grave?
That's with like Ewan McGregor.
Okay, yes, I can. Yes, wrong
Danny
title,
Boyle,
but
yeah.
I had the right movie, but the wrong title. There you go. Heavenly Creatures. Thank you for knowing that. Yes, Peter Jackson, Kate Winslet. Really awesome movie from like '94 when like her and Kate Winslet were just like pre-Titanic babies, and so I've always been a Melanie Linsky fan, and I love that she's given a chance to really come out and like be this like big time star um in this show. I mean, the cast, all of the cast, is really what makes this show so great.
Absolutely.
Like, there's no weak link anywhere. And I think what's also amazing, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, is the actors they have from 1996 and the actors they have playing the cast in 2021 are so perfect.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
like the best teen to adult performances. The only thing I can even think of, and of course it's because it's Mike Flanagan, but also because I just rewatched it with Charlotte, is The Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah.
Taking like the kids from Haunting of Hill House and then casting them as adults. I thought like Flanagan did such a good job there.
Right.
Even taking like Henry Thomas and then turning him into Timothy Hutton, which I thought was a great, actor aging up. Here, it's unbelievable. It's Sophie Thatcher to Juliette Lewis, insane.
Yeah.
Jasmine Savoy Brown to Tawny Cypress, unbelievable. I didn't write. Samantha Hanratty to Christina Ricci. Like, they look like they could be freaking twins.
Yeah.
It's and I didn't write down the name of the girl who plays young Shauna, but she's freaking great.
Young Shona is Sophie Nélisse.
Yeah, her and Melanie Linsky, again, like, they literally look alike. Like, and maybe that's just your brain playing tricks on you because your brain is trying to, make parallels between these two characters. But such a great job of casting by whoever is the casting director of this show. Phenomenal fucking job.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because I did a little research into the show. I was always researching the show when I was talking with Sherry, and I saw that they actually cast people on the show sometimes before they established like who was going to be playing which younger version or whatever. And so they had certain people have to dye their hair, change how they looked, but the end result is pretty uncanny. I think that Melanie Linsky and her young counterpart are probably the best example of this.
I just came up with a much better one than Haunting of Hill House. It chapters 1 and 2.
Oh, okay, yes.
Where, especially with like Bill Hader playing the adult version of Finn Wolfhard, and Eddie, the actor who played Eddie, like basically picking his actor to play, older Eddie. I think the actress who played Bev, like.
Uh-oh. Wow, this is off to a great start. I think Danny was saying something about.
Well,
go ahead.
I think Jessica Chastain to play me,
Oh, yeah. You kind of cut out there for a second, but you're back. You're good.
Yeah.
So the casting is awesome. And
talk for 1 minute. Talk for 1 minute. I have to tell something to Athena.
Got it. But I always want to talk about the behind the scenes. And I mentioned this when I used to do the show with Sherry too. The show is created by Ashley Lyle and her husband, Bart Nickerson. And I learned this doing the research recently that what happened was Ashley Lyle had seen that they were going to do an all-female version of Lord of the Flies. And there was some feedback from that. Like, there were comments and stuff where people were saying, oh, you can't have an all-female Lord of the Flies because girls wouldn't resort to that sort of barbaric way of thinking that the boys would, right? And Ashley Lyle was like, hey, girls can get pretty nasty too, and essentially came up with this show. And I don't know if you know this, Danny, but it's a show where they've mapped it out for 5 seasons, and they don't have it mapped out like, you know, episode by episode, but they have sort of things they want to hit in 5
Okay,
seasons.
so that makes me feel so much better.
Yeah,
because I'm absolutely, I know I'm a season late to this show,
right.
so I am probably the millionth person to make the connection to Lost. Very obvious connection where you have a plane crash, you have time jumps where you explore the backstories of characters, what's going on in the future, and it all centers around a plane crash and the survivors. Lost season one of the greatest seasons of television of all time. I don't think that is in dispute.
Yeah.
What happens after Lost season 1 is, for me, it was an absolute disaster. Season 2 was so bad that I basically said, I'm going to give it 1 episode of season 3. And if I don't like 1 episode of season 3, I'm done. And I didn't. I quit watching the show. I only ended up going back to the Lost because when I started dating Athena, she was a Lost obsessive, and it became like a condition of my courtship of her where I would have to watch Lost with her.
Right.
So I ended up binging Lost through DVDs, seasons, 3, 4, 5. And Lost had great characters, but Lost also had great plot points, and like the water cooler stuff about Lost was always like, what is the island? What is the black smoke? What's in the hatch? Why is there a polar bear on the island?
Right.
What do the numbers mean? It was never, oh my God, let's talk about Sawyer and Kate. No, it was, what are the answers to these questions? And nobody ever answered any of the fucking questions. I don't want to hear anything from anybody. Lost went off the fucking rails, and it was very obvious from the beginning they didn't have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're telling me that this show is tracked out and they know exactly where they're going, thank God, because it's going to save me tons of aggravation 4 seasons from now when I'm like, what the hell happened to the coach?
Yeah. Well, we should talk about those water cooler moments. I think that's a really great way to make this discussion kind of interesting. We can talk about the individual characters, but let's talk about how they fit into these questions, these overarching questions. And these are questions that Sherry and I would ask every single week. And we had a really great audience. There were people every week chiming in with their theories, and they would point out stuff that Sherry and I would miss. And so I think the main question of the show, and you can correct me if you think otherwise, but I think the main question of the show is, how did the Yellowjackets team devolve into a cannibalistic cult? And like follow-up questions to that are like, did they actually become cannibals? And then did they murder the teammates to eat them? So right away, when you start off the show, you have this opening scene, this prologue scene where we're in the woods. It's after the crash. It's a while after the crash at this point. And you see a girl running, and she falls into a pit. And then you see a bunch of costumed characters eating, meat. And so the assumption is that girl was murdered, and now they're eating the girl. Is that what you still believe after watching season 1?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I actually read an article right before you sent the link. The article was published on HuffPost by Candace Frederick.
Okay.
I want to give her credit for it. And basically her thesis, or her general question was, where's the cannibalism? And as a critic, she was able to watch, I think they gave critics the first 6 episodes of season 2.
Okay.
So, I'm not going to give any spoilers. She didn't give any spoilers. She mentioned Elijah Wood and Lauren Ambrose are on the show, but that's public knowledge. Like, they're on IMDb already.
Right.
And they tease that.
Yeah.
But one of the things she said is that season 2, and I'm quoting her here, she said season 2 addresses the 2 main areas of concern for her. Now, I don't necessarily agree with these things,
Okay.
but she said her two big areas of concern in season 1 were the thinly written characters, which I don't agree with, and
Bullshit.
the awkward flirtation with genre.
Okay.
And her point was they set up a bunch of cannibalism and horror tropes in season 1, but then every time you think they're about to pay off on them, they dart back to 2021. Or every time they're about to pay off on something in 2021, they dart back and they focus on, Nat and Travis's love story, or, Shauna and
Jackie.
Jackie's relationship, or something like that. And they never go fully into the genre or the horror of this show. And I messaged you as I was binging it. I was like, this is definitely like, there's like, I remember when I asked you, like, should we cover this maybe for the Lasser cast?
Yeah.
Because it certainly seems like there's a lot of horror elements to it. And you were like, oh yeah, we could definitely do that. And like, right off the bat, like the first scene of the first episode is like a group of cannibals who set a trap for somebody and then eat them.
Right.
And so, I do think it obviously, and the first episode, which we'll talk about season 2, you see Shauna eat the ear at the end, Jackie's ear.
Yeah.
So I think it's very clear we're going into cannibalism. They spend 19 months in this place, which means they're going to have to survive multiple winters, months and months of cold and snow, and they already are making, there's the bear. There's that weird bear that stumbles out, and Lottie just walks up. Lottie is an amazing character that does not get enough screen time in season 1. Yeah. And I think appears to be maybe one of the focuses of season 2, which I'm excited about.
Yeah.
But then there's also that amazing scene where they kill the deer and they open the deer up, and it's like rotted from the inside, infested with maggots, and you're like, oh fuck. So even the food that they are catching is not edible.
Right.
So I definitely think there is and then when you look at the 2021 stuff, there's so much friggin' grisliness in there. Like Shauna murders who might end up being an innocent person. We don't really know 100%. Yeah, we don't really know 100% if he's innocent or not. Certainly seems like he might have been innocent once all the deets are revealed.
Yeah.
Then there's Thaisa's weird shrine in the the crawl space of her
basement
house, where she keeps her dead dog's head.
Right.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of. And then there's fucking Misty, who is an actual psychopath.
Oh, Misty, I was waiting for when we would hear her name on this podcast. We're 18 minutes in, and we've not said Misty yet. It's kind of crazy.
That's another, like, just to stay with Misty for a second, like, the reason they're there for 19 months is because Misty destroys the black box of the airplane. Like, she's so fucking crazy that she thinks, well, if I'm alone in the wilderness, I can get this guy to like me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to destroy the only way we have to be rescued. And I'm really interested to see if that ends up coming up in the future. Like, if that plot point gets revealed again, because the audience is the only people that saw her do that.
Right. And, you talked about Lost a couple of minutes ago, and you compared it, and there are many, many comparisons to Lost. There's many things that this show has in common with Lost. I actually started watching the first season again with my daughter Pepper recently, and there's a scene with Locke where he actually sabotages Saeed, who's trying to find this radio signal. I was like, when I was watching, I was like, oh man, this is like Misty in the black box from the show. And so Misty and Locke are two examples of characters that in the real world, they're kind of ridiculed for who they are, or they have these messed up lives. And then when they are in this other world, this wilderness, they can thrive and do something bigger. And so I think it's very interesting. One thing that I always thought about with Yellowjackets and with Lost was that eventually with Lost, you got to this point where they were in the future and some people had come back. And that's what Yellowjackets feels like. It feels like that season of Lost where some of the castmates had come back to the regular world, right? And so as someone who's watched the whole season recently, maybe you can clarify this for me, but I felt like they always made it seem like the people that had come back home, the people that it was public knowledge had survived, were Taissa, Misty, Nat, and Shauna. I thought they always made it like those are the survivors and that's it. And then when you start season 2, they make it seem like Lottie was with them too. When you watch season 1, did you get that vibe that it was just those four, the four main characters?
So I get the vibe. I think like the show only, those are the four main characters.
Right.
Those are the four main characters. Shauna,
Right.
Taissa, Nat, and Misty.
Right.
But there's also, I mean, Jackie is a main character when they are the teenagers. Travis, we know Travis made it back.
Oh, right.
So we do know that Travis makes it back. I thought that because of how many, how many Yellowjackets there are at the beginning, it always seemed to me that they're just focusing on these specific characters and that there might be others down the line. Like we also know, because of, I know Lauren Ambrose is cast as adult Van. So I know Van survives as well.
Right.
Which is going to be interesting when they get to that, because she's obviously in a relationship with Taissa. What happens with that? Does that last the entire 19 months? Also, there's another character. Shauna's pregnant.
Right.
So, I mean, we're talking about, we're talking about a character who's pregnant, and we're talking about survivors, and we're talking about cannibalism. Are we going to get a baby eating scene?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be something. I don't think that a baby is meant to survive in that type of wilderness.
No.
So yeah, there are a bunch of girls on the team that are very obviously there as fodder. Like they are 10 episodes into the season, they remain unnamed. They're just like that girl in the background. A couple of them have some lines of dialogue here and there.
Right.
There's like the one girl who like calls out Misty because of the poisoning with the mushrooms.
Right.
And we're not going to let you fucking touch any of the food.
Right.
And like, she's like prominent in a few scenes, in a few episodes. I don't know her name.
Right.
I'm going to take a guess and go, maybe that's the girl that ends up on the spikes at the very beginning.
Right.
So I think we have our core four. Interestingly, this would make Jasmine Savoy Brown in 2 core 4s. And now I'm thinking,
you're gonna do some fucking Scream spoilers. I haven't seen Scream 6 yet.
It's not a spoiler. It's she survives in Scream 5. Okay. So basically, it's not really a spoiler because it's not ruining anything. It's just that she refers to her brother, Samantha, and Tara, who are the 4 survivors from Scream 5. No, she doesn't refer to them as, her brother refers to them as the core 4. And it's like a stupid nickname that he uses for them in Scream 6.
Yeah.
How many of them live or die? That I will not tell you. Go see the fucking movie. It's been out. Come on, Pete. But yeah, it is interesting that I'm watching this now after Scream, 6.
Yeah.
And she's basically in 2 core 4 groups because it's, obviously it's Shauna, Taissa, Nat, and Misty. But we do know that Travis makes it back, even though we never get to see him alive in this season. And we know Lottie is alive because of the ending of season 1 and the beginning of season 2. And we assume Van is alive. But really, after that, I don't know. Like, I kind of feel like we're gonna find out that based on what we know about Misty, I think it's safe to say that the surviving coach is going to run afoul of her again. She's already poisoned him several times. So I think, I happen to like him as a character.
Me too.
But I think that the writing might be on the wall for him. Or maybe the symbol is on the wall for him. Well, and there are, it's horror movie 101. If there's a big group of characters and several of them are just kind of background, they're usually fodder for the slasher killer. And I have to feel that whether it's wolves, whether it's cannibalism, whether it's Misty being a fucking psychopath, whether it's Lottie being a fucking, seer of the future and the psychopath, I have to think that several of these characters are going to die very gnarly deaths in season 2. And we're going to see, like, exactly who made it back.
Yeah. Well, okay. So that kind of goes along with, that was my question too, was like, who is alive from the crash? And we talked about that a lot, Sherry and I, last season. I always thought it was like the core 4 people and Travis. And then that brings us to question 3, which is how do the other characters die off? And so you mentioned a few things just now. You talked about that baby. And one of the most memorable scenes from the entire show is this dream sequence when Shauna dreams that she's giving birth. And then she gives birth to this weird sort of furry meat creature. And then she goes ahead and eats the leg like it's a fucking chicken.
Like a chicken. I like that that's obviously a dream that she's had multiple times, because when she wakes up and tells Taissa about it, Taissa's like, what was it this time? And she goes, a chicken. She goes, oh, okay. As if like the last time it was a cheeseburger. And I love that. Like, there's obviously... like, again, like, feed it, like, this is where, like, I don't know if I would even say that there's this, going back to that article I read on HuffPost, I don't know if I would even call this an awkward flirtation with genre. I think it's a very clear horror elements in here. There's a cult of some kind. There is some kind of supernatural something going on. There might be, they do a seance where they do a seance in the cabin because they find a dead body in the attic. There's rotting animal corpses. There's, even just on the basis of like man versus nature horror, there's wolves attacking them. Like friggin' Van gets her face ripped in half by wolves. There's so many horror elements. There's the whole idea, like we talked about, Taissa's childhood, where she sees that man with no eyes. My fucking God. Then there's her whole story where her son is like haunted by the bad woman in the trees, which we find out is Taissa, and that's something that's happened since the plane crash. So there's so many horror elements and things that either are supernatural or feel supernatural. And from the very beginning of this channel, I've routinely said cults are scary.
Yes.
And whether they are like an actual cult, the next thing I watch on Netflix is going to be the 3-part Waco series that they just dropped.
Oh boy.
Because that was like one of the founding parts of my freaking childhood that I remember, like the whole David Koresh thing. Cults are freaking scary, whether they're real life or whether they're supernatural, whether they're demonic. There's It's why I don't hate Halloween 6. It's why the first movie we reviewed for our channel, 1BR, it's why I love that movie so much.
Right.
And yeah, and there's so many elements of that in this season.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to just we were talking about these questions that you and Sherry would have watching,
Yeah.
like who survived. I feel like it's a testament again to the creators, the writers, and the directors and the actors. So many shows like this, you go 10 episodes and you don't even answer a simple question like who survived the plane crash.
Yeah.
You're going to be like, what the fuck? Come on.
Yeah.
But it didn't bother me. Like, I liked that answers would come sometimes unexpectedly an episode later.
Right.
Answers would come sometimes, in an adjacent scene. So yeah, I didn't mind that not everything. And again, you telling me that the creators have this show planned out makes me feel so much better that we might actually get the answers to this. So if I have to wait another season and a half to find out what happened to the baby,
yeah,
I'm willing to have the faith in the creators and the writers. I mean, the director of the first episode of this was Karen Kusama. Karen Kusama directed Jennifer's Body. She directed The Invitation.
Oh,
really cool horror movies.
Yeah,
she's like a veteran horror director.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I don't know if you could say we're awkwardly flirting with genre when you're hiring somebody like Karen Kusama to do your pilot episode.
Yeah, I honestly, the more you keep repeating that phrase the woman said, I think it's just bullshit because I've watched a lot of horror movies to review with you on this channel, and so many of them have reminded me of Yellowjackets since I first covered it with Sherry. Like, I think if we could call some of these other movies horror movies, and I see all of the horror community talking about them, Yellowjackets absolutely fits. And I mean,
think it's also, I think her main point was just she wants the show to lean into it more and not kind of, I'm having like flashbacks to Lost where you'd hear that noise where it'd be like, dun, 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 whoosh, and it would just take you to like, here's John Locke in a wheelchair in 1991.
Yeah.
And you're like, great. Okay. Yeah. Now he has hair. Now he's in a wheelchair.
Right.
Now he's being upset. And okay, I really wanted to know like what him and Saeed were doing with the hatch. Like, go back to the fucking hatch.
Right.
And like, so I get the idea of like, part of what I have an advantage with this show because I was able to binge it. Season 1 anyway. I was able to just binge through 10 episodes in a day and a half, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
I watched 2 episodes of this with Athena. She liked it, but she was like, I know you have to binge it. Just go ahead. She was like, I like it, but it's a little too, even like Athena thought it was a little too grisly for her.
Boy.
She was like, I don't know. Like, it was good, but you could watch it. I said, okay. I watched like another 2 episodes that night. And then I watched the next 6 episodes the next day.
Oh boy.
If I were watching this like I'm now doing in season 2, episodically, having to wait 6.5 days for the next one, maybe I would be like, oh my God, what the fuck? Just have the baby, Shauna. And 4 or 5 weeks from now, I might be like, why doesn't she have the fucking baby?
Yeah.
And it's, it goes back to, the age-old question in 2023 when, how do we consume media? Do we binge it in the Netflix way, or do we go episodically? And I know certain networks like Disney Plus does this with the Mandalorian and a lot of their MCU shows where they do episodic viewing.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works. Like, I think The Mandalorian is a good example of how it works well.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't work. Loki to me was boring as sin, and I had to wait a week to watch another episode, and I hated it. Right. And I think that's actually why I didn't like Ant-Man as much, and the whole Kang thing, because I just
Oh.
wasn't into Loki.
Right.
So like that character for me just wasn't strong enough. But yeah, you know, how do we consume media? I'm gonna get a taste of it really to an extreme, because I was able to binge season 1 really quickly, and now season 2 started, and now I'm gonna have to do the exact opposite, where it's like the long waiting game of, oh my god, I can't wait for episode 2 of season 2 now.
Right.
Although I am glad we are talking about it, and that way it's going to be like, okay, I could take notes on the episodes. I'll probably end up rewatching episodes, and us talking about it will like fuel that like fire for the next week.
Yeah. So like for Sherry and I, when we were going through it, and we had this great back and forth with our viewers too, you know, there were still some questions that I feel like they've answered some of these questions at this point too. But you kind of mentioned this before. Like I would always ask, is there validity to the visions that characters would have? Lottie was able to predict that bear that was going to appear. What's up with the symbols?
The Red River also, she saw like.
What's up with Taisha and the man without eyes? And so I was always more of a skeptic, and I thought that you could kind of explain away things like, you know, they're having this hallucination because they're starving, or they're, you know, Lottie is off of her meds, and that's why she's having these visions. I always went in that direction with the discussion. Sherry kind of went that way too. You kind of talked about this already, but then another question that I think is really interesting, and I feel like season 2 is maybe giving us an answer already, and I don't know if I'm satisfied with this answer. But the question that Sherry and I would always ask is, who makes everyone turn evil? Who makes everyone turn into these cannibals? And I mean, the obvious answer seems to be Lottie, right? But we would go back and forth and talk about how Lottie, you picture that she's the one that's the leader. She's the one with the antlers on. But Taisha also has this personality that comes out when she's sleeping. It's like, you know, hunter personality where she, you know, in the most recent episode, she bites Van on the lips, right? And, you know, she killed her dog and put its head on a shrine. So she wanted to take over the team. You know, she was always kind of like trying to step on Jackie's toes when they were back in New Jersey as a soccer team. And so it seemed like, you know, even at the camp, she was always trying to take over too. So it was like, is Taisha the one that kind of becomes this monster? Yeah.
And I also feel like and this goes for Taisha and for Misty, is that they set them both up as they're both crazy before anything happens.
Right.
Like Taisha breaks the girl's leg in the first episode.
Right.
You know, and I loved the reunion episode where they gave that woman the most ridiculous like New Jersey accent. Like, oh my god, the Yellowjackets are back. But like, you know, she breaks this girl's leg on the soccer field after telling the rest of the team, we can't let her play because she's not good enough. And, you know, she like, it's very obvious that that's intentional, whether she wants to admit it or not. So there's like elements of psychopathy there for her.
Yeah.
Before we ever find out what triggers this darker side of her.
Right.
And Misty is fucking nuts. We know it from the beginning. From like the minute we see her, she is fucking nuts. So, and then like as an adult, she's like lacing cigarettes with fentanyl to kill people. Like this is like so many of these characters. I mean, and Shauna even, like you could look at Shauna who the way she pursues Jeff as a teenager.
Yeah.
Like that is, you know, you feel like she does that almost as this like instinct of like, I need to have this. You know, this thing that belongs to my friend who has everything. I need to possess this.
Right.
And she ends up marrying Jeff.
Yeah.
Which is also like, as I'm talking, I just keep thinking like the baby that she ends up having in the woods whenever she has it, does Jeff ever find out about that?
No, I don't. Yeah, I mean, well, no, we don't know yet.
Yeah.
And that brings up question number 6 that I wrote down, which was a big discussion for the first season, but they do resolve it by the end of the first season, which was who was blackmailing the survivors. And so we see that Jeff was the one that was blackmailing the survivors.
Yeah, I want to shout out Warren Cole because, like, season 1, like the beginning of the season, he's just kind of like this throwaway, like, loser husband character. And then you think he's cheating on Shauna. And as the season goes by, he grew on me so much, and their family dynamic grew on me so much. The fact that, like, they seem like there's this unspoken love that they have for each other that is tied into their past. You know, where there's this joint guilt about, you know, he cheated on Jackie with Shauna and then Jackie dies. So he never gets to, like, resolve that. Like, they go to dinner with Jackie's parents.
Yeah, that's another memorable moment. Yeah.
And then there's the whole, like, that one of my favorite moments in the whole season. And I messaged you the quote where all the revelations come out. She finds the glitter. He admits that he is he's the guy who was blackmailing them, which leads her to bring up Adam, which leads him to bring up Adam, which leads her to just blurt out that she murders him. Yeah. He's seemingly totally fine with this.
Yeah.
And, like, it kind of turns him on that his wife was cheating on him.
Yeah.
And that she murders the guy, and they cover it up together.
Right.
Which leads to my favorite line in the whole season, which you said you made a thumbnail for your episode with Sherry, which was, did you really think I was going to book club every week? And he goes, there's no book club?
Right. Classic. Yeah. Great stuff.
So, yeah, the actor Warren Cole, one of the few men in this season who I think does such a great job. All the, you know, again, the entire cast is great. Like, the guy who plays Travis, young Travis, was really good.
Yeah.
You know, and you really feel like the tension between him and Nat as the season goes on.
Yeah.
We brought up the coach who's, you know, left with one leg after the crash.
Right.
Like him as a character as well. Yeah, it's just a smorgasbord of great acting throughout.
Right, but, you know, you brought up the men just now, and the thing is, I think that the show needs some credit for having such an excellent female cast. I mean, the majority of the show is a female cast, and everyone is excellent on it. You know, we haven't even really talked about Juliette Lewis being on the show. I think she's probably the biggest star besides Christina Ricci on there. And it's funny because Sherry and I talked a little bit about this behind-the-scenes panel they had at Comic-Con before the show actually premiered. They showed the first episode to the audience, and then they took questions, and the whole cast was there. Like, you'd have the teenage version of the person and the adult version. They were sitting in front of each other, right? And Juliette Lewis seemed pretty upset, and she even kind of, like, walked off before the show ended. And so we were thinking that maybe she was not happy with adult Nat. And so that was another question that I had that was sort of a behind the scenes question of, did they maybe change Nat's character this time around to make Juliette Lewis feel better? Because she even made a comment of, like, how Nat is not really a good person at all as an adult. And she seemed like a pretty miserable person. And that brings us up to the last question that Sherry and I would always ask. And this is a question that has not been answered yet, which is, who murdered adult Travis? Like, we all know it's a murder. And so it's like, did Lottie and her followers murder Travis? Did Misty murder Travis? You know, is there some other person that murdered Travis? Like, who would have done that? And so by the beginning of season 2, we haven't gotten that answer yet.
Yeah. They heavily suggest the last thing you hear in season 1 as she's being kidnapped is that former sponsor of hers saying, who the fuck is Lottie Matthews?
Right.
So it kind of makes you go in that direction, but
Right.
it's not explicitly announced. And you look at, Misty, and you think Misty seems like she could be playing multiple sides. See, I didn't think adult Nat was a character that was like a bad person. I just thought she was so troubled and so messed up from everything, and that included her childhood, which we get a view of, where her father basically dies in front of her and he was an abusive piece of shit. So you have all of that stuff, and obviously she ends up on drugs. Thaisa seems like she could be the ringleader of all of this.
I know. Yeah. And that's what just goes back to this idea of, is Thaisa actually the woman? They've never shown who the woman is that has the horns, that's the leader of the group in the very beginning of the first season. And so you're led to believe that it is, Lottie, but it could be Thaisa. It could be someone else too. That's what's so intriguing about the show, and that just keeps us going on. And there's a couple of other characters that we haven't mentioned that have interesting fates too in the show. There is the very religious girl. What's her name again?
Oh, Laura Lee.
Laura Lee, and then there's that moment where she's gonna go try to rescue them with the plane, and the plane blows up. But
also, that's where, again, there's this supernatural element, because they could have just done, okay, there's a technical issue with the airplane. They set her stuffed animal on fire.
Yeah.
As if to say, what do you, you think you can leave, Yeah. So that whole aspect made me feel like, you have this religious person who thinks God is going to rescue them, and her stuffed animal goes on fire, triggering the plane crash that kills her.
Right.
So there's that aspect, and she's the one who does she baptize? Lottie, right?
Lottie, yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I agree that there's this weird stuff that's always like, oh, is there more to this? Is it something supernatural? And one other moment that I wanted to bring up, because it's another one of my favorite moments of the show, is when they have their doom coming, which is like their homecoming, where it's like their little dance that they have together. And that's when they all have the mushrooms. They don't realize it. And there's another character who we haven't seen yet in season 2. We have Travis's younger brother.
Oh, yeah. I was going to bring him up.
Javi, right?
Javi, yeah.
And a lot of people, when we were having our discussion, me and Sherry, a lot of people thought that maybe Adam was Javi, like a grown-up Javi. And we weren't sure.
I thought about that for a while.
Yeah.
I thought about that for a while. I thought, okay, this guy looks younger than Melanie Lynskey.
Right.
It's very convenient that he would be, all of the conveniences that she starts to think about later on.
Yeah.
I thought about that, and his age being that he looked about 5 or so years younger than her.
Right.
It's like, okay, I see where this is going. But then he just is, he's not randomly, he's like, he's stabbed, gutted, cut up into pieces.
Yeah.
Oh my God. The fucking scene where Misty goes to that old woman's wake just so she could put the head and hands of Adam in the coffin. I mean,
so twisted.
Yeah. But definitely, who is, where is Javi? Could he be responsible for killing Travis?
Yeah, exactly.
Are we going to find out that he's just, that he very easily, the obvious answer is, oh, he died in the woods.
Right.
Shauna yelled, run. What the fuck happened when they were all on mushrooms and they all tried to basically gang rape Travis? And not gang rape him, they tried to basically murder him. And Shauna had a knife to his throat. And they were going to slaughter him and basically eat him that night.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. When you watch it in real time, where there's weeks in between, you're sitting there thinking, okay, is this sort of that moment where things shift? Is this the moment where things change? And if we're going with a 5-season arc, then it is going to be a lot slower than we thought. Like, we were expecting some really big deal, like some kind of crazy cannibalism by the season finale last season. And then really the major moment is Jackie's death, where she's frozen at the very end. And we actually weren't even that happy with that ending. We're like, oh, she just kind of fell asleep and she didn't realize that she was freezing to death. Like, Sherry had a big problem with that one. But where we begin with season 2 and with her frozen body, I think that's actually really intriguing too. We can talk about that when we do our season 2 episode review. But
I kind of, and that's so I think I kind of agree with Sherry, because I spent all of season 1 as I'm watching it. I'm going, okay, so like you were saying, who do we know as an adult?
Right.
And it was very clear from the very beginning, we're never going to meet Jackie as an adult.
Right.
So, okay, she obviously dies in 1996. How are we going to kill this character? Now, I started to think, oh, okay, I get it. Jackie's the one who goes face planting onto the spikes and who gets eaten in the first episode. And then when we get to the end and they have that big blow up, I'm like, okay, she's outside. I'm like, okay, she's going to, the wolves are going to come. And this is going to be like a big, like, she's ripped apart by wolves moment. And then we get, another one of those dream sequences with Shauna. And then, in that last dream sequence, am I thinking of the finale? Yeah, this is the finale, right? Where in the dream sequence, there's that mystery man in the dream who's signaling to Jackie, we've been waiting for you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. I completely forgot about that.
So who the fuck is that guy?
Oh, Jesus. I think he's supposed to be the guy in the chair.
Oh, okay. Now, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's a good thought. But so there's like, who the fuck is that guy? And when she wakes up and she looks outside, like even to the point where she looks out and she goes, no. I'm thinking, oh yeah, here come the wolves. And no, it's just like Frankie Carbone in Goodfellas. Like, come on. Like, I thought that was a little, what's the word?
Anticlimactic.
Thank you. English, hard. Yes, I thought that was kind of, for as main a character as Jackie was to the Yellowjackets, I felt that was a very anticlimactic death.
Right.
And we'll talk more about it when we get to the premiere, when we talk Saturday and we're talking about episodes 1 and 2, because I do like this next step, but I still not a huge fan of her death.
Right. Okay. Well, it sounds like we're on the same page about that. One thing that was like so exciting about that first season, though, was the idea of like, well, who is this woman that's in charge at their camp? And are there people that stayed behind in the woods and maybe still live there? And do they have anything to do with the blackmail? And as we found out, it's like, okay, well, the blackmail is just Jeff, right? And so there's these little reveals that are like, oh, well, I speculated something much more sinister or much more elaborate, and it's like a little bit more simple than I thought. But ultimately, with all this speculating, I didn't feel let down because, like you said at the very beginning of this episode, it's the characters, right? And just watching these characters and their hijinks, whether they're the teenagers or the adults, is just super entertaining. So
I agree with you. Yeah, it is. Yeah. I also feel like to your point, I'm a big pro wrestling fan. And so in pro wrestling, it's called fantasy booking, where it's like, okay, WrestleMania, true story, WrestleMania is this weekend. So it's like, oh, here's how I think the matches at WrestleMania should go. And you start to build in your head exactly what you would do if you were the person booking the show.
Right.
And then when it doesn't happen, you get mad at the company for not doing what you were thinking in your head, which is completely irrational.
Right.
But you do this when we watch television shows also, when we're watching episodic shows, especially like a Lost or Yellowjackets, you start to go, oh, okay, I know what's going to happen. I know who's the blackmailer. It's got to be Javi, or Adam is definitely Javier. And, oh, maybe Travis is, and you start to make all these friggin' things. And then when you reveal that it's just Jeff who got in trouble with some loan sharks, you're like, what? I don't like that. And then you're like,
Right.
oh, wait, it's my fault. I built it up to be something it wasn't. How can I be angry at them for, not reading my mind before the show?
Right. And here's hoping that all the people that watch the show with us and would do, what was the wrestling term that you just used?
Fantasy booking.
We had a whole bunch of people fantasy booking with us.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love fantasy booking.
Yeah, well, here's hoping that the people that fantasy booked with Sherry and I on Anchor Pete are coming over with us onto the Lastercast now as we dive into season 2. Yeah. But as we come up on the hour, I just want to say that, like, I've been dying to talk to you about the show ever since it fucking came on. I was like, Danny should be watching this. And now you're finally here. So now we can jump in. I believe season 1 was 10 episodes. And season 2, I believe, is 8 episodes, if I'm right. So
okay.
Yeah. So every week, Danny and I will get this episode up by like Saturday.
Yeah. And I really enjoy when we cover a show week to week. I with very few exceptions. There were a couple of
witches.
Yes. Aside from Mayfair Witches, we've had like some of our best discussions, and we typically get some really good comments from viewers about the shows we're watching, whether it was Interview with a Vampire, whether it was Raised by Wolves, which we reviewed over on Comic Books Transformed, which desperately needs a season 2. That was an HBO Max show. When I was reviewing the HBO Max show The Baby, I got, and you know what, that's another show. If you like Yellowjackets, everyone should go on HBO and check out The Baby season 1, because there's a lot of the kind of like, what the fuck is going on? What is this baby deal? Kind of feels very like similar to Yellowjackets, but also tons of great comments with that show. What was the other show we were watching? Oh, The Peripheral, which even though we didn't love it, I think we had good discussions about it. And so, I can't wait for this weekend to watch and then talk about episodes 1 and 2 of season 2.
Yeah, man. Cool. Well, we hope that you guys feel the same way too.